We're in the Getty Research Institute, in the Getty Center overlooking Los Angeles, looking at a magnificent drawing that was produced in 1892 in Rome by a German artist, Otto Greiner. It's a male nude seen from the back, and it is a spectacular example of the rendering of human anatomy.
The figure is not really grounded in space, except for this ledge that his arm dangles over. You can see the S-curve of his body and the distribution of weight with his feet locked together, and even the pressure that he places on the balls of his left foot.
And look at the way that that has all been described by the finest line in ink, and then with this lovely soft wash and highlights in white chalk.
And his head turns slightly. You can just see his eyelashes. You get the sense that he's twisting around a little bit, and the contrast between this hand that is so casually dropped over and the tight muscles on his legs.
There's a second drawing to its left where the artist seems to be working out a slight variation.
You get the sense that Greiner was wondering what this figure might look like if he was resting his head, crossing his arms over that ledge.
The drawing seems to me very modern, and yet it is so grounded in the history of the nude, a history that goes back to antiquity and then is re-explored during the Renaissance and explored again during the periods of the Baroque and Neoclassicism. And here we are now in the late 19th century, and the nude feels new again. But we want to talk about how it got to the Getty and why it will be leaving soon.
If we're going to start from the beginning, this drawing was produced in 1892. In 1894, it came into the collection of what is today the Kupferstich-Kabinett, part of the State Art Museums of Dresden, and it remained in that collection until World War II.
Dresden was one of the great centers of the visual arts, but it was a city that was also devastated during the Second World War.
In anticipation that the city would be bombed, many of the works were moved from the major collections for safekeeping, and the works from this particular museum were brought to Weesenstein Castle. It was understood that the works that were stored there would be safe from aerial bombing. However, after the war, when the collections were brought back and inventoried, it was found that works were lost. One of them was the drawing that we are looking at here. After the war, the curators of the museum were tasked with taking stock of what had been lost. And we can see this in the inventory books in which they tried to account for the whereabouts of each object. And an inventory book for this particular drawing is marked with a red V, which stands for vermisst, or lost. It was in 1987 when this museum published a catalog that was full of its wartime losses, including this drawing. And this was one among 4,800 other lost pieces that were published at that time. There was very little evidence about where this piece was until it showed up on the market in 2001, put up for sale by a gallery in Berlin.
So 56 years after the war, this object comes up for sale.
And it is impossible to say with absolute confidence where it went, but there is a clue. If you look very closely, you can see that there is an inscription in pencil that's faded out that reads Greiner, written in Cyrillic.
Dresden is in the eastern part of Germany, an area controlled in the immediate post-war era by Russia. Russia had been devastated by the Nazis. Russian casualties towered over the casualties of any other nation, and Stalin directed his forces to take valuable artworks from Germany in the immediate post-war era.
These Soviet trophy brigades, as they are often called, were dedicated missions undertaken in the late 1940s and the 1950s. And it was understood that the armies would seize cultural materials, seeing these essentially as reparation for the damage that the Nazis had caused. And many works from Dresden were lost under this premise.
But we're at the Getty Research Institute. We're not in Russia. So what happened?
So in 2001, it appeared on the market in Berlin. It was purchased by an American collector based in New York. 4 years later, in 2005, we see it on the market now for a second time from a New York-based gallery. A prominent Los Angeles-based collector acquired this drawing.
And ultimately, a significant amount of artwork was given as a partial gift to the Getty Research Institute.
When we acquire an archive of this type, we make a commitment to studying it over the long term. The work of processing an archive can be very extensive. This is very much a different process that we might see in a museum that would do the provenance research before acquiring a major work of art. However, in the year 2001, it was posted on a database called the Lost Art Database, which is a site in which many museums, collections, and private individuals post works that were lost or seized improperly during World War II. And so while the information about this drawing was available, it did not come to light until 2025, when we were contacted by our colleagues in Dresden, and they informed us that the work was lost from their collection decades ago. Their research was absolutely convincing, and we are very happy to be sending this work back to its rightful home.
But it's one thing to have a title and some basic information, and it's another to link it to an actual object. How do we verify that the drawing that's at the GRI is the precise drawing that was lost in Dresden?
That's where we are quite fortunate. In the year 1900, this image was published in a catalog of the museum's works. And the fact that we had a visual record allowed us to make the positive identification. Greiner was a very prolific artist, and he frequently undertook studies of the male nude. And so in order to ensure that this is the exact same drawing, there was close examination of its features. You can see this distinctive ink spot that allowed for the connection to be made. I'll also draw your attention to the stamp in the corner, which was not there in the year 1900 because that was added by the collector who acquired the work most recently. And so you can see that the object bears witness to the various stages of its life and these transfers of ownership.
I love that an incidental ink drop, something that the artist would likely have thought of as a mistake, was one of the keys to being able to return this object, to identify it, to give it this new life.
Today, provenance research hinges on many different types of research. We look closely at the marks that we can see sometimes with a magnifying glass, but provenance research is also undertaken in front of a computer screen, digging into databases like the Lost Art Database or the Getty Provenance Index. And so it's only by bringing together that very fine work that you can only do in front of an object with this wide base of information that we can begin to make these connections and understand the full life stories of these objects.
It must have been quite a surprise to get this note from Dresden.
Of course, it was a piece of correspondence that we took extremely seriously. And thanks to the amazing work of our colleagues in Dresden, it was clear that they had never relinquished title to this drawing and that they were the rightful owners. And they generously agreed that it should be put on exhibition before returning to Dresden. And we've continued to talk about how we can make the public aware of what it means to conduct provenance research and to understand the scale of wartime losses.
It's such a triumph that this wayward drawing is finally being returned, and it's being returned because of the cooperation of these two institutions.
This is the future of provenance research. There is a strong sense of collaboration and a desire for many institutions that we want to work together to resolve these issues. But I do want to underline that there are so many objects that have never been found and that there's still questions about. And so this is a really great story of the resolution of a wartime loss, but there are so many others that we are unable to track down.